Good evening. The April 16th, 2019 Ashland Board of Selectmen Public Forum is called to order. If other boards or committees need to open their meetings, please do so at this time.
I'll call for open the hearing for, or open the meeting for Conservation Commission.
Okay, seeing no other committees that are present with a quorum, this forum is being filmed by WACA-TV. If there's any other recordings being made, please identify yourself. And seeing no one, my name is Steve Mitchell. If the other forum members could please introduce themselves, and we'll start from my left.
I'm Michael Herbert. I'm the town manager.
Hi, my name is Gay Ohanesian, and I'm the technical consultant that the town has hired to help on this project.
My name is Bob Sexton. I am a safety consultant for the town as well.
Good evening, I'm Joe Mignani, member of the Board of Selectmen.
Yolanda Greaves, member of the Board of Selectmen.
Jeffrey Lingham, Conservation Commission.
Gregory Wands, member of the Conservation Commission.
Kathy Van Lanker, Conservation Commission.
K.G. Narayana, member of Conservation Commission. I'm also on the Board of Health.
Carl Hackinson, Conservation Commission.
Thank you. This meeting has been scheduled as a public forum to provide residents and stakeholders an opportunity to comment and to ask questions regarding the eversource gas transmission line replacement proposal. To be clear, this is not a public hearing. The Board of Selectmen are not advocating for this project, nor is the board a permitting entity. The board's concerns have been focused and continue to be focused on the public health and safety of all Ashland residents, as well as working with other town boards and committees to achieve the best outcomes for the town. This proposal is currently under review at the state level with the Energy Facilities Siting Board and at the local level by the Ashland Conservation Commission. There's a handout available at the door that provides contact information for the Siting Board and the Conservation Commission, as well as a timeline of key dates and events. I would like to note that both the town's technical consultant and legal counsel are available to provide background on the Siting Board process, and Concom is available to provide background on their process. Our legal counsel is on his way. He should be here shortly. Also, there was a request made to eversource to participate in this forum, which they declined. Before we open to comments and questions, do the other selectmen have any comments to make?
Just there's a correction. Town council won't be available this evening.
Okay, sorry. So town council will not be available this evening. Yolanda, good. So I think at this point, Jeff, did you want to make a comment before we open up the floor?
Yes, as Chair of the Conservation Commission, I thought what I should do is just sort of lay out where we stand in this. We're still very much in the middle of reviewing the process and the project. We have engaged a peer review consultant who knows more about this than we do as volunteers and laymen, and we've yet to hear their comments on the project, proposed project. So we are nowhere near coming to a decision or forming any solid opinions about this project. And I just wanted to lay it out there for you now that we're still open-ended on this, and we will remain that way until we have all the information in front of us and all of our questions have been answered. So, right, and to be clear, this is only on the wetlands issues and the stormwater permit. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So at this time, I would like to open the floor to comments and questions. The microphone is over to your right-hand side. And if you would please state your name and address when at the microphone. We'd also like, at some point, we'd like to get a count or some acknowledgement of people in the audience that actually have an easement on their property and/or are abutters as listed in the on the docket. So, thank you, and the microphone is yours.
Someone sure has to start. Martin Ring, Bay Colony Drive. Thanks. I'm an abutter in the sense that I'm one of the owners of the Great Bend Farm Trust, which is a chunk of land about 50, 60 acres over that way that this project would go through. And my questions are fundamental. What are the levers that the town has? It's my understanding the selectmen can't say no. It's a public utility and a state project. The Conservation Commission can say something. So could you elaborate somewhat and tell us what levers can be pulled and what do you hope to accomplish in any regard for the town? Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. You're absolutely correct. It's a state process with an entity known as the Energy Facilities Siting Board. And then again, at the local level, we have the Ashland Conservation Commission looking at the extent where there are wetlands issues and can permit and condition projects based on the evidence that's presented there. What we can do is we can provide evidence of the impacts to the town of Ashland, both from a general perspective and then also from individual abutters' perspectives as well. That gives us the opportunity to demonstrate what kind of impact does this have financially? What kind of impact does this have ecologically? What kind of impact does this have in terms of quality of life? And it gives us the ability as interveners, and I should say that the board took the step of filing for intervener status to give us that seat at the table. It allows us to present evidence in support of all of those things and try to extract some kind of conditions or mitigations from the siting board that they would see fit. And one of the ways we do that is we utilize a technical consultant like Gay, who's been through the process, who has knows how the process works, kind of knows from a technical perspective what the impacts are, whereas we might know from getting correspondence from residents and saying, oh, well, this is going to impact my yard, or this is going to impact the wetlands in the area. So does that answer your question? Okay. Those are about as far as I feel like the levers that we have that we can pull. It's not very many.
Oh, Marty, can you come to the...
Since you said mitigation, what does that really mean? Does that mean that the utility company and/or the state gives Ashland something for, the damage that's done? I don't think that's the same as remediation, which is repair after the damage is done. So, yeah, can you elaborate more on that?
Sure. I think the short answer is that both the siting board can impose conditions and you could negotiate certain agreements with eversource. I'll let Gay expound on that.
Good evening. Michael is right. The EFSB, the siting board, is taking in all the information. So we basically have had a hearing this past week to present a number of the issues that the town has, because this pipeline is coming through, and it's not a new line, but it's a replacement line of an existing line. So the 6-inch pipe has been living and operating, I guess quietly, from what I understand, for almost 70 years. So that's why, as the town of Ashland has changed from a more rural community to a more suburban one, as developments have occurred, this is a disturbance in 70 years, even though folks probably know about the easement, but they're probably not sure of what's going to happen. So the FSB is a siting board that the utilities are required to petition for any significant changes. So over a mile in a gas pipe, if there's going to be a replacement, the utilities have to go to the siting board and ask permission to do so. And part of the evaluation that the EFSB has to do is look at basically 3 things: need, and that goes into reliability also; cost, to make sure the routes offered and the projects offered by the utility make sense, and they're not going to cost us as ratepayers, in our gas bills, more than it should; and impact. And the impact is on both environment and on people. So they look at, so I think cost is pretty evident, which the different routes, it's a calculated number. Need, I've heard some questions and issues about that, but I will tell you what I've been telling people here on the board, because they want my technical input. There's something called a pressure drop. So let me roll back a little bit. This pipe goes from Wilson Station in Hopkinton. It's, where the tanks are. There's a station, it's called a gate station, or take station, called Wilson, and it's on Wilson Street in Hopkinton. Actually, I drove by there to check it out myself. And this pipe, this 6-inch pipe, goes all the way to Pond Street on the east side of Ashland, and that's another gate station. So at these 2 locations, gas comes in to feed the whole network for the whole region at these locations. The location in Hopkinton is a real hub. It's almost like a hub and spokes of pipes coming out from Hopkinton. So Ashland being right next to Hopkinton, you actually have 4 gas transmission lines through the town of Ashland. So this is one of them, and it's considered a distribution one, not a transmission one, which are typically higher pressure. So there's 3 other lines. One is from Tennessee Gas. Actually, 2 are from Tennessee Gas, and 1 is from Algonquin. And the 4th one that we're talking about tonight is NSTARS, or it's now called eversource. So that kind of gives you the picture of what's going on. So this pipe from Wilson to Pond Street has been 6 inches when they installed it in 1952 or thereabouts. The easements were formed in 1951. The construction was done in about 1952, so that's going to be in the range of almost 70 years. So what they've done is to help. Well, over the years, everybody's come to live here, a lot more folks in this area, including the surrounding areas, Framingham, Hopkinton, Hollis, Natick. So this system, the eversource system, the distribution system, which eventually steps down to the lowest pressure into your house, which is about 1 PSI at your houses. It comes in from these gate stations at about 300 to 400 PSI. There's a regulator on Prospect Street, which they just rehabbed and improved, and that's where the gas distribution system steps down to 60 PSI, and then there's other regulators that step it down until it gets to your house at 1 psi, because at 1 psi, it's not really dangerous in your house at that level of pressure. At 60 psi, if something punches through there, someone will get hurt, physically with that pressure. But so that's the system. So what I'm getting at is it's 6-inch since 1952. So with all the increase in homes and businesses in the area, and with this network, the folks and businesses at the end of the network, on certain situations, if there's a cold snap, if there's not enough gas coming in, if there's an incident, won't necessarily get gas at the end of those areas. So what the company wants to do, because it's called a pressure drop, they want to make, right now at each end, at Wilson Street, about 2,000 feet is a 12-inch pipe, and from Pond Street coming in, there's another 2,000 feet that's a 12-inch pipe, and in between it's 6 inches, so it's like a bottleneck, this pressure drop. So what they want to do is change that bottleneck into a whole 12-inch pipe from Wilson Street to Pond Street. That's actually a good thing in supplying our gas to us in a responsible way, and to make sure, and this is what the utilities have to do. The utilities every year, whether it's electric, gas, or other types of utilities, have to go through a forecast and look at all the combinations of things that can go wrong for reliability. If a pipe breaks, or a supplier can't supply, or a tank has a stuck valve, they have to consider all these different incidents, and they're required to do this under certain regulations, and the regulations tell them what issues they must consider, and they have to figure out the probability of that happening. So every year they do that, they come up with their forecast, and they take into consider weather as part of the forecast, and we know how that is in forecasting weather. Sometimes we have cold snaps and very tough winters, and sometimes we don't. But with that evaluation, they've figured out that if they eliminate this pressure drop, they will be able to provide everyone in the whole region gas at a more reliable way. So that's what they want to do. So that's what the project is changing out that 6-inch part to 12-inch, so it eliminates a bottleneck. So I just want everyone to understand that. You can ask me some more questions about it, and also ask Bob questions, he's a gas expert in safety too. So what are the levers? The EFSB, the siting board, needs to evaluate all this. Again, need and reliability, cost, and impact. So they're going to look at this and say, this makes sense. You've shown us in your forecast that you could probably have brownouts or not enough gas at the end of this area for folks in this area. So if you go down to minus 10 degrees like we did this winter and an incident happens, people are going to have frozen pipes, or, cold can be a dangerous thing, especially at that level. In fact, the same sort of incident happened on January 30th in Minnesota. And there's a video showing the governor of Minnesota asking folks for a period of, I think it was almost a week, to reduce their temperature, their home thermostat, thank you, to below 65 for almost a week, because they were close to having brownouts because of these incidents. And this is the type of thing that utilities have to do these studies and forecasts to prevent this. So when you turn the lights on, you expect to get lights all the time, 100% of the time, every day. Same with gas. And gas also feeds the power plants that make the electricity. So a different entity called ISO also looks at that too. So that's kind of the whole picture of what's going on. I think it's important that people know, why this is happening. And it is a pipe that's been there a long time. Our country and Europe have used gas. Our grandparents and before that had gas lights in their houses. So since the 1800s, gas has been a way we light our homes and heat our homes. And the other really good thing that's happening is people are switching from oil to gas, and gas runs cleaner. So those are type of things. So more people are moving to gas for whatever reasons, and that's kind of the whole system. So getting back to the issues at hand, what are the levers? Well, the EFSB decides on this, and they provide an order at the end of this whole hearing process. And they say to the utility, you will do this, and if there's issues in the town that we have presented at the hearing that the board thinks that they can order the utility to take care of, which includes mitigations, and we can go over what those types of things might be, we can get that order. So that's one way. The other way is negotiating what they call a host community agreement. So the board might say to the utility, you need to develop a host community agreement with Ashland, and you need to make sure you take care of these concerns. So that's the other lever. So those mitigations include having someone check drawings to make sure that the drawings are safe and the design is proper. Check the construction process to make sure that the procedures they use are proper and safe. Even though they're regulated that way, having a third party or a second pair of eyes on it is a good thing and may alleviate some concerns in light of the different issues that happened up in Andover and Lawrence. The other thing is having a field person over the course of, it's a 5-year project. I don't know if you know that. It's 5 years starting in 2019. They want to do about 4,000 feet a year, starting in Hopkinton in 2019. They want to go from west to east. We asked them, do you have to go that way? And there's certain conditions that they have to meet. That 6-inch pipe has to be continuous or contiguous. You can't chop it up and do one piece here and one piece there because the pressure drop will be even exacerbated if you did it that way. But that's one of the things we asked because the town has many projects, so we wanted to make sure that the projects, there's less conflict between the construction and less traffic. So getting back to the types of mitigation, so we want a field construction supervisor who works on behalf of the town. So over the course of the 3 years in Ashland, having someone to oversee that and making sure that the installation is done in a way that takes care of Ashland and Ashland's assets. And then the fourth thing we asked for in this aspect of it is someone who's a liaison if the route goes through the preferred route, which will go through people's owners' parcels where the easement is, having someone who will be a point of contact and be able to answer the questions right away. And we asked for that period of time to be beyond this, meaning sometimes you don't see restoration or damage properly the first year. So we've asked that 2 years after the restoration is done, that there's some recourse if you see that plantings weren't done properly or the plantings have died off and didn't catch, or where they filled in, it's now a dip down, so you want that refilled. Because when you construct sometimes, when you tamp it down the first time, it doesn't always, it sometimes dips down because of the compaction. So we asked for, over the 3 years, someone to work with the owners and the town as a liaison plus 2 years afterwards to have a method of recourse with eversource, so you don't have to do it on your own. We've worked with the town's selectmen and town management, and we have asked for some sort of surety or a bond to make sure that once eversource is done, there's a way, if you find your driveway, which might have been dug up, you have a dip in it, they'd be able to come back and fix that. So that restoration should be done properly, and that you have recourse even if you don't see it right away. We've asked for, right now, they didn't have an agreement ready, but we've asked in the hearing process for a typical agreement. What does that look like? So we're waiting to hear back on what that is. And that agreement might be to anyone who may have a parcel with an easement, where it definitely would be a trench going through that. If it goes on the preferred route, would then need the restoration. Actually, I would like to ask if you could raise your hands. How many people here have a piece of property with the easement going through? Great. Okay. So I'm sure you all have many questions. That's the type of thing that we'd like to find out, and in speaking with the selectmen and the board, those concerns, and being able to make sure as residents of Ashland that things are taken care of properly over this course of 3 years, plus 2 that we're asking for. We don't know if the FSB will order that, but we're making a case for that, and we're asking for them to do that. So those are the type of things we're asking for. The other type of mitigation that we're asking for is, in doing this construction, it will put a strain on the different departments. This is a long answer, but hopefully I'm covering a lot. The police department, fire department, actually Chief Roby and Chief Alfano were with us today, and also
BW Director Small, Evan White, our project engineer, and then Megan Dos Anjos, who's our conservation agent, as well as myself.
So we're all there today answering questions at the EFSB to show the FSB, what are the things that will be a disturbance or, basically a pain to Ashland, and and describe those things in a professional way, in a professional forum of what we would like and what could be done. So those are the type of things that happened today and during the course of the hearing. So we went over routes, access by emergency vehicles, because we were concerned with the safety and access of emergency vehicle apparatus to some of the more isolated neighborhoods, because if there's construction going by the mouth of the street that you're on, you might be limited in how fire, police, or others reach your neighborhood. So that was a large discussion today. Actually, Ms. Michael talked a lot about the police details that would be needed to safely have traffic and school buses and everyone be able to work and travel on a daily basis by having enough details to cover the work. And those are the type of things which would hopefully be covered by the EFSB order. So they would provide mitigation of maybe improving some signaling, improving, let's see, we had 13 items that are listed that you can all see on the EFSB site that we did ask for. It's in the testimony we gave in the pre-file testimony a couple of weeks ago. So there's, I wish I had the list in front of me right now, excuse me. There was some signal mitigation, message boards, some lighting for nighttime work, if it makes sense to do nighttime work, which I know the chief does not prefer to do because of noise concerns, but sometimes it might be more effective from moving people and commuting, because this is a commuter avenue with Route 135 and your other routes here. You have people coming from Hopkinton going to Framingham and vice versa each day, coming through the town of Ashland. And we talked about that Metro West is the local hospital in Framingham. How do you quickly get people and get the emergency vehicles through the town if there's construction? So those are the types of topics that we talked about and presented today. So that's enough for me right now. Hopefully I've answered a lot of questions.
Is it consensus here that I'm getting the impression that this project is going to happen no matter what, and town has to live with it? Or is there reason to think that it isn't that definitive? And then I'm done.
Do you want me to answer the question? So based on my experience and knowledge, because it's in an easement, which is the legal right of the utility to have, and because the pipe has been there and they want to eliminate this pressure drop, I believe that because of this need, this will go through. It's very simple. It's like fixing a pipe in your house. If you have a bottleneck in it, it needs to be fixed to improve the flow, so you have
Marty.
Well, the question was if we encourage people to use electricity instead of gas. Well, right now, and by the way, my company works on a lot of renewable projects. We're specifically in hydroelectric and other areas, wind, and we're looking at storage. But so, you know, the push is definitely to go towards renewables, but to have a safe and reliable supply to turn on the lights and to have heat for us, because we live in a cold area, we're not there yet on technology. So it's going to be a step-by-step way of getting there. So pushing ahead with renewables is great, but next year and the year after, we still need the power plants to turn the lights on, and we still need gas to go to our houses for now. So I can't tell you exactly what will happen in the future. Maybe storage technology will improve and we'll get there sooner. And we're making great strides, but today, tomorrow, and in the next 5 years, I believe, you know, we all need gas to go to our homes, and we need the power plants to, you know, work on gas and other fossil fuels, and eventually that will probably be, you know, lessened and lessened. But right now, the practical approach, or it's not even a practical approach, that's what we have right now, and that's what we're living with. So you just can't do this overnight. It's going to be a step-by-step approach to reach the goals that the states have set for, you know, more renewables. But right now, the technology isn't there to do it completely. So this is a very small and concise focus. It's just changing a pipe to eliminate a bottleneck.
May I say something, please? Martin, back to your question about the Great Bend Farm Trust. Conservation Commission holds the conservation restriction for that trust. I'm not really familiar with it. We still need to look at it some more. If you have people in the trust that can read something into it about what can and cannot be done, please bring it to our attention. We will consider it. To answer your other question, is this a done deal yet or not? I would say no, it is not from our end. There are a couple things that eversource still has outstanding. For instance, they've, in their notice of intent, they haven't really addressed the 25-foot no disturb bylaw that we have. If for some reason, you know, we deny the whole notice of intent, which is for the state part of the Wetlands Protection Act, they appeal it to the DEP, to the state DEP. A denial under the bylaw means they have to go through state superior court, and that's would be another long delay. But there are a few things they have not shown that they can do the work without impacting the wetlands, and we're still waiting to see how they present that to us. So to the second part of your question, I'd say it's still wait and see for us. Carl, would you like to say something about the?
Marty, in your question, is this a done deal? Do you mean is the pipeline a done deal or the preferred route a done deal? I think that we have to delineate between those two things. I think the answer that Gay gave is more to the former, and the answer that Jeff gave is more towards the latter. That's mine.
So Marty, just you know, come back to the microphone if you have more questions. But I think to go to Carl's point, I think that you know, one of the gaps in this, at least from the siting board, and correct me, Michael and Gay, if I'm wrong, but one of the gaps is that there's not a whole lot of information that eversource has provided about the noticed alternative route. All they focused on has been the preferred route.
Okay. Sandy Basic, Brayburn Lane, we're in a butter. And this is definitely focused on the primary route. Cookingham Green has had a leak in their 6-inch pipe. It was repaired. And with that 12-inch pipe coming through, there's a huge vulnerability. Old infrastructure, because I've worked with critical infrastructure now for 7 years, coming into a repaired, but we don't know how good that repair was. And yes, the pressure steps down. What are the safety things that are in place that repair doesn't blow as it's been stepped down? Because regulators fail.
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you for that. Sandy, the repair is that was made, right? There has to be some formal documentation that it's done correctly, right? The workers are not, I mean, they're qualified individuals. They've made the repair correct. For Ashland community, some things that can be done on that end, a less invasive form of digging around that activity, around that pipe, using what you would call vac trucks, and other items called air spades. They're a very great form of removing a lot of soil and not disturbing any of the known or unknown utilities that they may encounter. Or vacuuming, yeah. So essentially, okay, yeah, all right. So that's a typical process when they know they have a known utility that may be more sensitive to any type of work activities going on in the area. That's something that can be identified up front for the crews, and at the same time, they can plan it and actually work it in a different working method that's less invasive.
So even with the vibration of digging the ditch that comes through, you know, Hardwick and Panic right now, that vibration is also going to be included in that survey as you're doing that digging?
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of eversource, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, when you look at the situation, vibration typically comes from heavy equipment, right? So if they're out there with a fairly large excavator, that's when you're gonna experience vibration.
Right.
When you're out there with a vac truck, the Vector systems, that's a different ballgame.
Okay.
It really is. It's much less invasive to the soils around the area. You know, you can literally clean tree roots with air spades and the vac truck and not disturb a tree, the underground rooting system of it.
Okay.
So that's kind of, as long as they're aware of that, as long as Eversource is doing the right thing, that's something that can be taken care of.
Thank you.
And in the petition, which is public, they did mention that they're going to use vac trucks,
Okay, yeah.
so.
Okay, good evening. It still is. It took about a half hour to get up here. Is either one of you that talked, especially the woman here, look at the plans before you brought them to the town to the show? Have anybody saw the plans in the conference boardrooms situations and discussed on them in your company's four walls? Because you went on for about almost a half hour or so and said everything from A to Z. Figure we were board members that's going to take it all in.
So the drawings were looked at together. This is on, so the information that was given is there's construction drawings that were given as part of the notice of intent, which is part of the petition, so on the preferred route. So detailed drawings were given to the town, and engineering, conservation agent, and myself went through them, and we went over them with a fine-tooth comb. We didn't like some of the things, so we wrote those items down, which are all documented also in this hearing process. And the FSB has those things to improve those drawings and answer our technical questions and the town's technical questions. With respect to the notice alternative, that level of drawing detail was not there, and today we must have said it, 50 times? That we did not have the same level of detail drawings as the preferred route, and so it's hard we can't make decisions unless we have good information. So we didn't have that information at that same level of detail at the preferred route. So we were asking for that information.
Okay. And when you did get that information and brought it to the town and went through the timeline sheet that was handed out, and now what's in town's hall offices and can be reviewed at the library, is that a final blueprint of what's going to happen?
I understood today that they had recently updated the drawings in the past, I think, few days. Last week, I think, they were received by the town, the latest. So they are making updates and evolving, and that's how typically engineering designs and plans go. There's a few steps to get to the final. And again, this is on the preferred route. So those are being reviewed by conservation right now, and I'm not sure if engineering has looked at them yet.
I believe conservation's in the middle of getting a peer review for that aspect. So just to reiterate, there are two routes that have been identified, the preferred route and then what's known as the noticed alternative. Those two have been clearly identified since the submission, I think, a while ago. I think one of the things that we skipped over when talking about some of the levers and some of the ability, some of our tools that we have, is we can also advocate for changes in the route and differences in the route. And that is one of the things that we have been doing. Gay has introduced another alternative. DPW Director Small has introduced an alternative to the noticed alternative, so we call it the alternative route. But as Gay mentioned, part of the problem here, and what we've articulated very, very clearly today, is that we don't have enough information on that noticed alternative route to make an accurate determination as to what is going to be best. So if you look at our departments, from an operational perspective, they said, yeah, the preferred route is the best. But when basically, they were flying blind, if you will. They had maybe half the information that they needed. And I think that's a problem that we have outlined, and I don't think I can make it any clearer than that.
Okay, I got some more. I went to the Concom meeting. Eversource had a rep engineer and people there talking with the plans and the printouts and what they show to the crowds and explained themselves. It took about an hour or so to get through everything. Got rebroadcast at home, and hopefully some people saw that because it's a little bit better than what's going on here so far. But other than that, I went to the library today, as Concom suggested, look at the plans at the library at your leisure and make your own decisions. I have. And I came up with some questions for the blueprints and the big white Eversource notebooks from year 2014 up to 2018, and scenic route tree removals and everything that was going with it. And I have just a few questions. They may be technical and they may not, but I want to make sure I get these out in the open. My first one would be how do you use the buoyancy controls, and why do you need 40 feet for space as you go forth in your construction?
Could you repeat that?
You install, it says in the construction, on the maps, construction notes, March 28th of 2018, I saw this. The buoyancy controls I think it's going to be in the wetlands, we need 40 feet of spaces to construct on and to work, coincide with the pipe and to put in the ground.
Is it the BMP controls?
Yes.
Okay, that's the best management practices for environmental.
Gotcha, yeah, that's just I believe what you're talking about, that's literally just the clearance area around for the work zone. So what they're saying is for this path, in order to have the correct, staff, equipment to bring into that area, they're laying out a general guideline there of 40 feet.
Okay.
So they have to put certain environmental
Yes.
controls, and
Yes.
actually, if Concom can speak to that more directly, because as being more experts, there's silt fencing, there's certain requirements that they call it best management practices for environmental controls, so that when they trench, that material comes up, it doesn't get dispersed into the other parts of the wetland or even on your street. Those are the best management practices. So there's a whole book, and that's what you're referring to, on best management practices for environmental controls. And maybe Concom can speak to that and what you're asking them to do.
Mark, I don't know what buoyancy controls are. That'd be a question for eversource.
Okay, then if it's got to be just like that, I'll go on then, no problem. How many different types of test stations will there be on the pipeline works from end to end? Because I saw in the map there's going to be like about 6 testing types.
These are the corrosion tests. So to keep, for example, the existing pipe, the 6-inch pipe, doing well and not corroding for almost 70 years, there's something called cathodic protection, which is used, and there's materials, which is like a metal called anode beds, that are hooked up by tiny wires, and the electrons actually move towards the pipe so that there's no corrosion. So basically you have sacrificial metal in different areas, and there's none, the anode beds are further away, but they go towards the pipe so that the pipe doesn't corrode over the years. And they check these test stations, and I don't know how many are there. We can
It
count
says
it up.
6. It says 6 on
Okay.
on the plans themselves, March
Right.
28th,
So
2018.
it's basically near these, the test stations, which are a small valve box, so that they can access it near the street. So it'll be like in a sidewalk or in the street, so that they don't have to walk down the right-of-way or the easement to get at it. So they probably exist right now in certain places along the existing right-of-way and easement. So when you open these up, there's wires, they come with a tool, they measure the voltage, and they can tell if they need to turn up, it's called a rectifier, or turn it down so that they keep those flow of electrons towards the pipe so that material doesn't come away from the pipe and corrode. So that's how they kept it going for all these years with this cathodic protection. So they're just small little boxes where they can go and actually test the pipe, and that's a good thing.
Okay. I
Is that
do have
good?
more.
Yeah,
Good.
you nailed it.
How many dams and pumps would there be going on this project? Dams and pumps along the wetlands routes. You gotta control the water and the soil somehow.
My understanding of reading the drawings and some of the documentation is that when they do cross some of the creeks, the way they're going to cut through is they're basically going to dam the creek, and they have a bypass so the water can go by while they're working. So they may need a pump if kind of the water gathers there. So as they install the pipe, they'll have this little dam in place, and then once the pipe is installed, then they'll put it back and restore it to what it was. So that's how they cut through each of the streams. And I don't know if Comcom can correct me, I think there were 5 streams in Ashland.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
There's one near me where the pipe just goes over it. Yep. It's fully
Yeah.
exposed. Yep.
Michael and I visited the route, and we did see that, and they did address that, and they said because of this project, they will be taking care of that, and the new pipe will be underground, so you won't see it, but at this point in time, they've been testing it and checking it, and it's good at this time, is what they said.
Okay, and I got a follow-up question on that. Well, you just brought up. How will the old retired pipes, what's going to happen to them after? The retired pipes?
What eversource has said right now is that they are going to abandon in place. So what they do is they clean out the 6-inch pipe, and they will cap it on either side. So it will be abandoned in place.
And,
Excuse me, Mark.
okay.
One point on that. That's what eversource is proposing, is just cut and cap each section. I'd like to see the abandoned section of pipe filled completely with an inert material, say a bentonite slurry, so that if and when, 50, 100 years down the line, that pipe does corrode, it doesn't create an unwanted conduit for groundwater in the wrong direction. So that will probably be one condition that we require of them at some point. They may have, another alternative might be that they continue to leave cathodic protection on it, just as is, just pretend, let them think it's as if it were still a live pipe, but just use cathodic protection to make sure that there are no leaks in it, something like that. But I don't want to just see them cut and cap it, or maybe put a little bit of foam in each end. We think that's inadequate.
And when you go to test the soils, you got to put borings in to test the soil with the jack and boring material. Why do you need 50 feet, every 50 feet, to do that as a measure?
Is this borings to do the soil samples?
Yes.
Sample analysis, yeah.
Typically, an engineer wants to know what materials they're what they're digging into ahead of time. Is it rock? Is it clay? Is it sand? Is it a mixture of that? So knowing what they'll be encountering allows them to choose the tools that they'll be using to do the trenching. So and also what the pipe will be installed in that environment, so knowing what that environment is that the pipe will be seeing is another reason to know the soils in that area.
And if there's any excess drill fluids from the drill itself, how would that be contained?
Typically, that's an auger bit used for drilling. It's not a wet application, so there won't be water.
What are track pads used for?
Truck pads?
Track.
Yeah, so if you're moving heavy equipment in and you have a sensitive area, wetlands or some sort of soft soil conditions, the truck pads are actually
It's
installed.
TRACKS. Truck.
Yep, truck pads, sorry.
Track.
Truck pads. It's this,
Same sort of
same
Same thing?
But the process, when you get heavy equipment in there, nobody wants trucks stuck in their backyard or
So it's the
anything
same
like that.
thing,
So
okay.
it's, the trucks come in, the pads are all laid across, and that's gonna be the path for the right-of-way access.
And my last thought for the town-wide sort of thing, I'm not in the butter. I don't live anywhere near what's gonna happen, but it's gonna affect about 60% of residential properties. Thank you.
Cliff Wilson. I do have a brief list here. They're not quite as long. First of all, the question of need. No.
Just from the Conservation Commission, we have not deliberated as a commission on this, so any opinions that we give are the opinions of the individual commissioners and not of the commission. It's be inappropriate for us to talk about what we think what the mitigations would be at this point. So that's to your point.
Thank you, Cal. I'm not on the Conservation Commission, by the way. I am not in a butter. I am a concerned citizen of Ashland. As to you had mentioned that one of the questions was the need, and I do question the need. I'm not an expert on it. I'm not going to go there, but I do question the fact that it is even needed. One of my concerns is for the abutters, and my question is during the course of this, or leading up to this, or whatever, the property values of the abutters, there's got to be a question there. I mean, if I was in a abutter and I wanted to sell my house, and I said to the potential owner, oh, by the way, eversource is going to come in here next year, or in 2 years, or in 3 years, and everything you see is going to be dug up and messed up, but don't worry about it. Just, give me an extra $20,000 right now for the opportunity to have eversource come in and do that to you. Somehow or other, I don't see that happening. Is that factored into the equation at all? Do the property owners have any recourse over their property values due to them using the preferred route? That's one question.
The EFS, what I understand in the process, that property values are not considered in this process.
Well, they should be. Number two, you had mentioned the fact that, and I will address this to you because you did mention it, that people knew that they had easements on their property. Well, perhaps not. I'm sure when they signed their deed, they probably noticed a little line that said that, oh, and any easements that apply to your property that have been forthwith recorded. Now, the fact that you might have to go back more than the 50 years required for a title search to find out what that easement is on your property, all you know is you have an easement. You don't know where it is. You don't know what it is because it's not in your deed. But if you do go back to the original deed, what it does say in the eminent domain deed is that there will be one pipe. There will not be a pipe left beside. There will not be anything more than that. So you're saying, oh, piece of cake, rubber stamp this, what the heck? And by the way, I don't feel that you're advocating for us. You sound more like you're advocating for the company. But it is not a simple case of putting in one pipe and replacing it and leaving the old one down. No, their easement right is to have one pipe and one pipe only in the ground. So if they're gonna do it, let's go for the pound of flesh, ounce of blood, and have them remove that old pipe. That's gonna drive up their cost, and maybe they'll say, you know what, we don't really need this after all, because the cost is too much now for us. That's it, thank you.
I think those were good questions, and those were the same questions I had when I read the same thing. So tonight I'm trying to give you straight answers, so I'm not going to give you answers as a technical consultant and my experience that is telling you something that you would like to hear. I'm telling you these things because this is how I think it will happen based on my experience. So I apologize if I'm sounding like I'm not advocating for you, but I think by telling you straight, at least you'll have better information to move forward and make your own decisions. So that's my approach. I'd rather tell you what I think. Now, with respect to the one pipe, when I saw that, and I agree with the gentleman, I'm sorry, it was a Cliff Wilson. When I read that, I had the same thought. I said, it looks like it's one pipe. And, you know, I was asked by folks, you know, what do you think about this? And I said, well, it'll be a choice for the town. So I don't advocate for the town. I provide technical support. So the choice will be, and this is what I said to them, choice will be, do you want the second pipe to be trenched? Do you want, once they put in the new pipe, they're going to put one trench in to put in this new 12-inch pipe. Do you want the 6-inch pipe to be removed because they're going to have to do another trench? So that's a choice. I'm a technical consultant. I'm not going to make that choice. That's a choice for Ashland and for yourselves, the owners of the easement property. That's something I think if eversource sits down with you, you have that choice to have that removed. If indeed it does say one pipe. What that means, I leave it up to the lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. What was said and what will come out and is that, you know, I think eversource feels that they have the right to abandon in place. That's the way I took it. So that's what they're saying. I'm here as a technical consultant, not a legal consultant, so I leave that to the lawyers, but it's something that, you know, I also had the same question. So is it one pipe? And your choice will be, do you want to leave it there because your parcel won't be dug up as much? Or, you know, do you want it removed for the long term? So that's a question. So that was a good question, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Foster, hold on one second. I have a question, Gay. You mentioned the development agreement earlier. What's the likelihood of that being part of this process?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning.
You had mentioned earlier that a development agreement may be part of the siting board's order.
A host community
A host
agreement. Yes.
All right.
So
what is the likelihood of that occurring as being part of this process?
I think it's a high likelihood because other towns with other projects with other utilities typically have a host community agreement if they intervened. So the good thing that Ashland has done is that they've intervened so that they actually can negotiate a host community agreement and also put these issues in front of the siting board, because if the siting board orders these for Ashland, eversource must comply. So in a way, having the siting board on Ashland's side to order these things that Ashland has asked for, but the EFSB may grant, they will be ordering, there'll be an order, it's called a final order, to eversource, and they will have to comply with what's in that. And part of it might be to have a host community agreement with certain stipulations. So that's happened in other towns with other right-of-way things. So it's good that Ashland did intervene, because you have this opportunity. I know other towns, they, don't have that opportunity or have a host community agreement if they haven't intervened.
Thank you. Your turn, Dave.
Oh, me?
Your turn.
I'm sorry, I fell asleep. Good evening. I'm going to be talking probably for the 100 or 200 people that this is going to affect. They're going to have their backyard, side yard, driveway dug up because of something that took place 70 years ago. So first of all, I'm questioning the need. The need does not seem to be Ashland's need. It does not seem that Ashland is going to get a lot out of this project, except for what it will do to the land. So it benefits Framingham, Sherburne, et cetera, the other places. So our need, and it sounds like with this intervenus and intervene, and yeah, it is intervenus, isn't it? But some of the issues that we're trying to get out of the project may be good, but I don't know what that is yet. So I do question our need. And there's a couple of hundred people that are going to get seriously affected by the need of probably about 19,000 others. So my question is that fair? I don't think it's quite fair for putting a pipe back into a spot that was put there 70 years ago. And we're only going to do it because we put it there 70 years ago. That does not make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that now with technology, they can do it other places. They did it in Hopkinton. They just put a gas line down Route 135. We still got the police department to do what they had to do, the fire department to make their calls. I mean, I hear how much with the DPW, I hear about the fire, the police. I understand their issues. But there's always a way to get around somewhat of their issues to make it safe. So we can't, I hate to use safety as one of those types of things that we can't do it because of. The cost. We have not even talked about the other versions, even though there is a notice of an alternative and there's a notice of alternative. But that's not in front of the SBA. They don't know that. They're only dealing with version 1, which goes back to where the original is. It's been said, well, how can we weigh things up? I don't understand if they can put it in Hopkinton, why they can't go down the road or the sidewalks all the way down. Oh, I know, because it's going to cost another $10 million. That's the reason we can't do it. That bothers me. That's not going to save my gas bill. It can be saved. I want to congratulate you for being honest, because I think you said a little while ago, they're going to probably do this. Mm-hmm. They're going to do this. I'm going to try to say, I hope they don't. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to say, for the couple of hundred people that it's seriously going to affect them, I hope they think of something else. Because if it's going to affect everybody, because of traffic, tie-ups, I got to go another alternative, then everybody gains from it. The people who are in Framingham was going to receive most of the gas. They come through town, oh, they're going to have to wait. My problem? No. Those are things that I think we have to think about. The siting board is only looking at one item here. There's nothing else before them. So they're either going to say yes, or they're going to say yes with a lot of conditions. And it's a done deal. We have members of the Board of Selectmen, our town manager, who's supposed to represent us. And even though a couple of hundred people is not a lot, but they're townspeople. They've been here. And they didn't know, and I've had people even throw their hands up and says, I can't fight the Goliath. I'm not even going to the meetings. I can't do anything about it. I don't like that feeling. I want to be heard. I want some discussion. I want some discussion on the other alternatives. I want to have cost factors. Why can't they go faster? They probably could go faster. Instead of 4 years or 5 years, they probably can do it in 3 by putting it in the road or a sidewalk. Why don't you put it in the sidewalk and then get all brand new sidewalks all the way down through town? Hey. That's all I gotta say, because I said most of this at the Conservation Commission. They've heard that I'm redundant, I'm saying the same thing I did a couple of weeks ago in front of that board. And I asked that board to do their job as best as they possibly can on behalf of the townspeople. I will ask the Board of Selectmen to do their job on the best, and also town manager, and you as a consultant, to do the best you possibly can for the couple of hundred people out there who are really going to get hurt by this. Thank you.
If I may. So I think the overriding theme of today's hearings, one of the things that we made, David, was exactly what you said, is this is a regional pipe, this is a regional issue, and Ashland shouldn't bear the cost of solving a regional problem. And I hope that resonated, and I hope that was heard. There's a lot of different perspectives to look at this from. I have the ability, unlike some of the department heads, to look at things in a more holistic and global perspective. I'm able to raise the issues that you raised, and that's what I did today. Because for me, if this project is going to happen, we can look at cost two different ways. There's cost to eversource, and then there's a cost to the town, right? And I don't know what I can do to tell you how we advocated for that, or that we advocated for that noticed alternative route. But that did come up today, and it came up several times.
Hi, Keith Ferguson. Just a second. 5 Old Country Path. I'm an abutter to the pipeline, and I'm also a trustee of the Great Bend Farm Trust. And as you know, that makes me a part owner of some of the trust land where the right-of-way runs. But I'm not here because I'm an abutter or because of the Great Bend Farm Trust land, although that does concern me. I'm here today because I'm concerned about increasing fossil fuel infrastructure. Now, Gay had mentioned that we use gas for electricity, and that's true, but I believe it's also true that this pipeline does not feed a power plant. Is that correct?
I have a map, or actually it's in the petition, which is public.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows the grid of the Tennessee Gas, the Algonquin, and the N-Star grids put together on one map. I don't know for sure where the endpoints are. I believe it does feed power plants.
Okay, let's table that for a moment.
Or contribute to. Yeah.
Sure. I also know that now I'm a true New Englander, so I don't actually feel the cold, but I know other people do heat their homes with gas. I heat my home with gas. My wife's from California, so I have to do that. I know that right now we do need gas to heat homes and to cook and stuff. I don't pretend to have all the answers to that. But eversource was asked if I know you didn't mean it to sound so dire, but the kind of situation in Minnesota where people had to turn their thermostats down and stuff, that has not happened here on this line. And considering the cold we've had, I don't know if that's going to happen unless we continue to build more homes that use gas. So maybe they're planning for this future, and I guess as a provider, that's their business. I understand that. I don't really want to talk about that either. I want to talk about climate change. I know that that's not one of the purviews of the board. I'm concerned about the wetlands as well. I think the Concom has that under control, but at some point we have to question whether or not we should continue to expand fossil fuel infrastructure. Now, more people want to build homes, okay, they need heat. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I'm wondering, you've been talking about mitigation, I wasn't aware of this, but is there a way that we can remediate, mitigate, whatever, the cost of fossil fuel, the cost that burning it has on our environment? For example, could maybe every abutting homeowner who wants them get solar panels? Could this be provided by eversource? Could the state work out some kind of a tax break to the town so that we can expand a solar farm that would undo some of this. I know you probably don't have an answer to that, but this is something I think we should do. I also feel that as a town, maybe we just need to say no to this. Maybe we are the town who started something different, something new that the state can do. If we're going to expand fossil fuel infrastructure, maybe there has to be a way to mitigate the impact that has on the environment. And maybe we can be the ones who do that first. Maybe we can help the state come up with a way to do that. So for future things like this, future homes that use gas, future pipelines, future fossil fuel infrastructure can have a way, a mechanism built into law that will mitigate that impact. My kids are little, they're gonna grow up, they're gonna deal with climate change. I need to be able to tell them that I did something and that I helped other people think of ways to do something. Now, there's something else I wanna say, but like everyone else, I didn't take notes. You'd think that the current administration would be a good example for you should take notes before you get in front of a microphone, but I didn't do that tonight. Now, if I could only think of this one thing. Oh, yes, with respect to my friend in the orange vest who was here ahead of me, who also waited so patiently, this is gonna affect a lot more than just a couple hundred people. It's gonna affect more than those who the pipeline runs through. It's gonna affect more than the town. Now, you had mentioned that people are moving away from oil to burn gas instead. That's good, gas is cleaner. But on the other hand, it's not, because the reason we have cheap, plentiful gas, natural gas, is due to fracking. Now, I saw this lovely satellite photo the other day of the Aurora Borealis over the Great Lakes. It was beautiful, but it wasn't as beautiful as it could be because of this blazing light over the Dakotas, brighter than New York City. That's the burning of excess gas from a fracking operation. The excess carbon put into the atmosphere from operations like that, I'm sure, undoes any benefit we have from switching from oil to natural gas. I know that the board only has so many things it can do to stop this pipeline. Concom is probably in the same boat. But there has to be something that we can do. Something at the state level where we say, if this is gonna happen, let's undo some of the damage. And I don't know if anyone has an answer to that right now, but I think that this is something that has to be discussed. I'm gonna hang up here in case I remember that like one more thing, you know, but I'm gonna let you guys respond for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I will say that as part of my testimony, as part of what I provided, I did ask for money provided by Eversource to Ashland for the purposes of establishing and continuing significant energy conservation efforts. That was in part, I think, due to an email that you had sent probably a couple of weeks ago. Mm-hmm. It's very generic. It's very general. Didn't have it very, very fleshed out. But I do think it is important to introduce that part, that element into the discussion. And I think you're right. It does need to happen at the state level. I think at the local level, the Board of Selectmen and the Sustainability Committee are working towards a net zero resolution. I think the Sustainability Committee will be hosting a forum on that next week. I think there will be more about that at town meeting with the hope of actually filing that resolution at town meeting in the fall and developing a plan. So I do think there are a lot of people that share your sentiment.
Now I'd like to do a little song. Don't go changing.
Margie Gassell, Adams Road. I am a retired research scientist with the California Environmental Protection Agency, and I am now a member of the Ashland Sustainability Committee, and I would like to read a position statement from the committee. Ashland is committed to supporting Massachusetts' goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the use of non-renewable fossil fuels that are the primary cause of climate change. Natural gas is a non-renewable fossil fuel-based form of energy that produces carbon dioxide when burned, which contributes to climate change. More seriously, it unavoidably leaks methane into the atmosphere, both from the fracking process just described that produces most of our natural gas and from pipeline leaks. Methane is a highly potent greenhouse gas that is about 30 times as powerful as carbon dioxide and thus has a major impact on climate change. Natural gas is not a form of energy that we want to use in the long term, and further investment in natural gas infrastructure is counterproductive. On a statewide level, a 2016 study commissioned by Attorney General Maura Healey determined that, quote, the region is unlikely to face electric reliability issues in the next 15 years, and additional energy needs can be met more cheaply and cleanly through energy efficiency. Sorry, need some water. A recent analysis, which is specific to eversource's proposal to expand the Ashland pipeline, was completed by Professor Larry McKenna of Framingham State University. And I don't want to speak for him, but I would like to try to summarize what I learned from his presentations. He found that there is no need for such an expansion. He calculated the probability of a failure scenario envisioned by the company occurring on any given day at about 0.001%, and concluded that the existing system is reliable at the 99.989% level. He further determined that the actual market for natural gas pipelines clearly demonstrates no additional pipelines are needed. Professor McKenna's calculations confirmed the results of an analysis done by the Conservation Law Foundation, or CLF, that also determined there are no reliability threats, including reserve depletions or rolling blackouts, for an extreme winter in 2024-25. The CLF concluded that New England can achieve substantial improvements to fuel security issues without any new gas infrastructure. At the public hearing held in September 2018, eversource representatives asserted that there is no safety concern with the existing section pipe, and no repairs are currently needed. There are, however, 37 unrepaired gas leaks in 2018 in Ashland alone. eversource's website puts forth a commitment to renewable energy and an acknowledgement that consumer trends are moving away from fossil fuels. If eversource believes that it's facing a capacity issue in the near future, they should be investing in more renewable sources of energy and demand reduction conservation activities for their customers. In addition to the lack of need for this project, we are deeply concerned about the effects on the environment and wildlife inevitably associated with large-scale construction projects such as this one. The so-called preferred construction route would destroy trees, particularly within our state park and wetlands. The Wetland Protection Act, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, protects wetlands and the public interests they serve, including flood control, prevention of pollution and storm damage, and protection of public and private water supplies, groundwater supply, fisheries, land containing shellfish, and wildlife habitat. To damage wetlands is not only unjustifiable in its obstruction of conservation law, but is particularly threatening because trees and wetlands play a crucial role in sequestering carbon and thereby counteracting the contributions of greenhouse gas emissions to climate change. In a paper published in 2018 in the journal Wetlands, Moon Ma and others underscored the need to prevent disturbances of wetlands in order to protect their carbon stores and climate adaptation and resiliency services. They concluded that preventing wetland loss is important to meet climate goals, and the role that wetlands play in sequestering carbon from the atmosphere needs to be better appreciated by wetland and climate scientists as well as by policymakers. To deliberately destroy these crucial resources is indefensible and inexcusable. For these reasons, the Ashland Sustainability Committee concludes that eversource's project proposal is out of sync with state emissions goals and the long-term environmental health of our community. Thank you.
Brandy, hold on one second. I just wanted to acknowledge that Professor McKenna is in the audience tonight, so I think we may give him an opportunity in a little bit. There's a line up here now, but we'll give the professor an opportunity to speak in a little bit.
I'm Brandy Kensman, 6 Lucy French Way. I also have concerns about the proposed project, especially the preferred route. I do hope that that there isn't a definitive move forward, that we absolutely have to move forward with this project. I hope that Concom and others find a way, another solution that potentially could work. I do have a question, because I know that you had mentioned eversource wanted to start this project in 2019. Is there a date, an end date, when the siting board is going to make their final decision? And what can all of us in this room do to have a voice and to possibly affect what the siting board looks at and reviews and ultimately decides?
This process will finish up, this hearing process, in a couple of weeks. And then the town council will be writing a brief to summarize what Ashland wants and its concerns with this. So that's part of the hearing process. There is an EFSB handbook that's online if you look at it. The last update was in 2016. That might be on the Ashland website too, right? Did you? Okay, all right. But if you Google it, you'll be able to find it. So that gives you an outline of the procedures, probably better than I can tell you tonight. But things that you can do, what I've seen in other hearing cases is that folks can write to the FSB. The docket number of this is 18-02, and those letters will be posted publicly on that docket, and the EFSB will read those. This process started in 2017, and it's reaching its end. So again, I want to be straight with you. There's little that can be done at this point with new routes, although I was able to propose some, but I got questioning today about that, because a new route cannot be, or new parts of a route cannot be added unless everyone is noticed. So the opposing attorney was questioning whether I knew that or not, and I do know that, but at least we were trying to put in a good solution that might take some of, this is with respect to the preferred route, move some segments into the street for this line to work. So there were some places where I thought you could move it into the street, but what would have to happen is the owners of that parcel would have to allow a new easement to go from the existing easement to the street. So somebody has to be kind enough, or to do that, to allow the pipe to go down there. So that could be a question. So with that type of configuration that we proposed. So we did try to move parts of the line, the preferred line, into the street. So that was proposed. There's also another hybrid route. So there's two hybrid routes. There's different segments that when the preferred route intersects with the noticed alternative route, some of the segments that are in the easement, we said, why don't you try and move those into the noticed alternative route? So it's a kind of a switchback between the noticed alternative route, the preferred route, mostly in the wetlands. That one didn't come out because there was no place to move to, because it would be a much longer noticed alternative route. And just from experience, I knew that wouldn't be, it would be thrown out. They wouldn't consider it. So I tried to give them a route that would be considered, but it's not the perfect route. None of these choices are perfect. So that's kind of what we've done in the last few weeks to, just offer some solutions that Eversource might consider. So there are a couple of hybrid routes that we've tried to do.
Okay, and I had one other question. As far as the timeline for this, it's a 5-year project, and then there's an additional 3 years for Eversource to make restorations to the properties that are affected, and then potentially an additional 2 years on top of that. So that's, and I'm just verifying. So technically, it could be a 10-year
Yeah,
timeframe?
So my understanding of this is that each segment that they do, so every 4,000 feet, they'll address those owners in the preferred route, and they'll work out an agreement. So, and what I did ask, and I listed that a schedule be defined in the agreement, so you know when restoration occurs and what you would expect, like when they would do it. Because sometimes restoration, you can't do it until springtime, or you can't do it until fall. So, and what will they do in between that time to make sure your driveways have enough gravel to pave over, to go in and out, you're not having a muddy area, things like that. So you should be able to know what schedule is there in that agreement. So each year they'll address. So I think there's 88 parcels altogether. 2 are the ones mentioned tonight, the Great Bend and Ashland State Park. The other 86, I'm guessing, 20 of them are in Hopkinton, and, I would say 66 are in Ashland, is just a guess. I didn't actually count them up. So out of those parcels, in the 3 years, so my guess is about 30 a year would probably be addressed. So out of those, in that 4,000 feet, there's probably 30 parcels. So that group would have their yards restored probably within the next year or so. And then we asked for a 2-year period for any problems that might show up, that you still can go back and, get that fixed again. Because sometimes, when you plant things or dig things up and excavate it, it doesn't always come out perfect, and it takes a year or a season or 2 with frost heaves or something that it, it is done the way you prefer it. And that's the thing, is I've seen folks who welcome a restoration, I'll put it this way, because you can have your yard redone, in essence, if you want to look at that way. So that would be one way. The other way is, the pain of having it ripped up and living through that. So, that's 2 different ways of looking at it. That's a choice of looking at that way. So it is a way to, if you want to get your yard fixed, it's a potential way of doing it.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hoffman, before you go, I'd just like to make an announcement that earlier when you all walked in, you were asked to pick up a timeline. On the back of the timeline, there's addresses and web email addresses that you can send your letters to of concern to the folks that make that decision. Those are the hearings officers. One of them is Donna Shockey. She's the presiding hearing officer. Her email address and phone number is there. I could suggest if you have concerns, and let her know how you feel about this project. The email is right there, so send it off to her as well. So, Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Curtis Hoffman, 58 Hilldale Road. As many of you probably know, I'm a professional archaeologist, and my concerns are on that issue alone, though of course I have opinions on the rest of it. At your Board of Selectmen meeting earlier in the month, I presented 2 areas of concern to me archaeologically, and I did forward that letter to the board with copies to the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer of the Aquinnah, who is very much involved in these projects, and to the State Historical Commission. Since that time, I have received a number of additional documents relating to this aspect of the project, which I thought should be made known. First of them, and it's very peculiar, is a letter apparently addressed to the Ashland Historical Commission, though the letter purports to be a letter to the Commission on Indian Affairs, the Mass Commission on Indian Affairs. And it's very unclear as to what this letter was sent to, because there's no indication of who got copies. But in any event, it notices the Commission on Indian Affairs of the existence of the project, but fails to identify the areas of concern that they should undertake. So for that reason, and at Roberta Sulzman's recommendation, I have forwarded a copy of that letter to the Aquinnah Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. And she has been invited to this meeting, though I don't think she's going to be able to make it. So, but they are now noticed because the commission might have no idea why they're getting this letter. So that's document number 1. Document number 2 is a permit from the state archaeologist to conduct an archaeological survey. And it was issued to a firm called TCR in Ellsworth, Maine. I've looked into that firm on the web. It is an engineering firm, which has apparently some archaeologists attached to it. I have no idea from looking at their website what their archaeological expertise is. They don't list anyone's names. I have no idea what experience any of them may have in dealing with traditional cultural properties or ceremonial stone landscapes such as we have in the Ashland State Park. And I would hope that the Board of Selectmen would make inquiries of that firm as to what their experience with this sort of thing is, because we do know that our state archaeologist has no regard for such properties, unlike all of the other state archaeological offices across the United States. We are an outlier in that, and as a matter of fact, there are about 3 times as many of these properties in Massachusetts as in any other state across the eastern seaboard. I have the documents on this. And the third piece of information I have from the eversource is a layout of where they expect the archaeological work to be done. And there are several areas that are noted. The 2 areas of concern to me are not among them. And so I would hope that in your deliberations with them, you make it clear that these areas ought to be looked at, and in particular, the ceremonial stone landscape, possible ceremonial stone landscape, because as I told the board, I can't determine that it is. The only people who can determine that are the tribes. But if they agree that that is what it is, that area should not be disturbed at all with vibrators or anything else going anywhere near that. There was a recent case about 2 years ago in the town of Sandusfield, Mass, way out west, where FERC wanted to put a pipeline through and it would disturb about 75 monuments. And they said, oh, well, you know, we'll take them apart, we'll put them back together again after we're done. And a native advisor from the Narragansett Indian tribe made the following comment: if you do that, you will have created an artistic representation of a sacred site and destroyed the sacred site. So that will not wash with the indigenous people. So I'd hope that the boards will take these matters into concern along with all of the other matters. Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question? The commission that you referred to in the part 1 was which commission?
Commission on Indian Affairs. They were putatively the recipients of the letter, but the letter was addressed to the Ashland Historical Commission. I don't understand that at all.
Okay, I do know in right-of-way projects by utilities, they do have to get the appropriate archaeological permits,
Yep.
which investigate.
Now,
and
that's
should
the
find-
Massachusetts Historical Commission. So we have an Ashland Historical Commission, which is appointed by the Board of Selectmen. We have the Massachusetts Historical Commission, which is a body that has a number of official representatives on it. And then we have the Commission on Indian Affairs, which is also a statewide commission. And so keep the commission straight.
Right, then that's
Yeah.
why I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
because it's not my forte, but in dealing with linear projects
Yep.
where you have to excavate, those are taken very seriously, and the environmental scientists who were on the different projects, they actually met with, on one project I'm thinking of down the Cape, met with representatives of the Indian
Mashpee, no
Affairs.
doubt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mashpee, and to make sure things were taken care of. So I do know on those projects, and they were my projects, they were taken care of well, because I wanted to make sure they were done well. So hopefully it'll be done here, and hopefully this information is passed, you're saying it is passed on to them,
Yes.
but you're not 100% sure? if
Well,
it's
I
being
have
considered?
passed the letter on to the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer of the Aquinnah. The Aquinnah, along with the Narragansett and the Mashantucket Pequot and the Mohican, have formed a consortium on sacred landscapes, and so they are most interested in this issue, more so than the Mashpee are, and more so than the Commission on Indian Affairs is.
I know there's another company that is typically, I think it was TRC.
TRC, yeah.
Would hire, who does the specialty, and if they don't have the experts, I think it's what was used in the past down the Cape was a company called PAL.
Oh, I know PAL, sure.
Yeah,
But
so-
they're hiring archaeologists. I mean, I saw on their website, they've got
Okay.
a position and opening.
So they
So
do
they
address
have their own.
these matters very carefully, because it can, hold up a project
yes.
and things
But-
like that.
But
so.
in Massachusetts, we have this peculiar problem with the Massachusetts Historical Commission, which doesn't recognize these sites. And so I maintain an inventory of them, but Massachusetts won't, or at least not at present. So they need to have gone that route also. So I'm trying to just make the connections between the Aquinnah and the company so that everyone is fully informed. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Sigmund. My husband and I are here in the audience. We are butters at 2 Pennock Road. I've appeared before the board on other occasions, but the reason I wanted just to state a few things is just, I understand the board is taking this very seriously. The Conservation Commission is taking this seriously. We've been both attending some of the meetings. We filed objections with the siting board over, I think that they were all due last year sometime. And the reason we filed objections was not because of the wetlands. I didn't actually understand all the wetlands issues until recently when we started attending the meetings, but rather it was for safety reasons. We have 3 kids, and after the explosions in Lawrence, and Andover, and North Andover, and then Woburn, we had a lot of concerns about this project, which is going to increase the amount of gas going through our property. And so that was the reason for the objections. I also understand there's new legislation that has been proposed in Congress because of these projects of this sort. And so that's the first thing. And ma'am, you didn't mention that one of the considerations of the EFSB is safety. I imagine that is one of the...
We talked about safety
Okay,
quite
all
a
right.
bit today. I'm sorry if and I said to them, it almost goes without saying, safety is the most important thing. So that was...
Actually referenced your objection.
Oh, thank you.
And-
I hope it was helpful.
And that's why tonight
Very
we do have a safety expert here today who, a technical expert, but his is safety. And so if there are any questions tonight on particular aspects of safety, Bob will be able to answer those.
Oh, that was just, so that was the reason we initially objected. Having now attended, myself, one of the meetings, and my husband, the other, a Conservation Commission meetings, where eversource was present, which I find it very troubling they're not here tonight, by the way. I'm not surprised, but it's very troubling to me that they're not here because they seem very defensive at points during the Conservation Commission meetings that I attended, is that when I posed the question about, well, first, from my perspective, it sounds like the impact on the wetlands will be devastating. And that will affect the whole town, not just the residents that have the easements. And what eversource said at one of the meetings was they've never done a project like this that would impact the wetlands to this degree. That I thought was pretty astonishing, by the way, because typically the pipelines are under the roads. They're not in wetlands. So we should be questioning why is this project going to be allowed to occur in the wetlands. And then when I asked a question of, I don't know which eversource representative it was, I said, so this is really just about costs, correct? And he said yes, $11.6 million. I mean, he was trying to say, well, really it impact. I'm like, no, it's about cost, and he admitted it was $11.6 million. So that is really why the alternative route they don't want to use, because the preferred route is just cheaper. But then the last item that was very striking, I thought, was the size of the easement isn't large enough in the wetlands to do the work. And that was admitted at the last Conservation Commission meeting. So, ma'am, when you said they have the easement, well, they don't have a big enough one. So they can't do that project in their preferred route. And the last point is they just didn't do a good job surveying, and their title research was very deficient. And as a result of that, I think we should really be pushing back. And Conservation Commission, I think you're doing a great job in asking the hard questions, but this should not be approved for the preferred route. They should be required to use the alternative route for the safety of everyone and for the safety of our wetlands, and so they don't damage them any further. That's all I have to say.
Adam Elbert, 5 Bobcat Hill Lane. I had a couple questions. First, who officially as the interveners are representative to the EFSB when we take our case to them beyond the town council's brief that's put together? Is it the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, the Board of Selectmen have intervener status.
Okay.
On behalf of the town.
So they're our chief advocate in this to make sure that what the citizens of Ashland want is actually what gets done. Correct? Okay. So my opinion on this is that the preferred route is completely unacceptable. Destroying wetlands has got to be off the table. Okay. They're going to pass along the cost of this route to us no matter what in increased rates. So you know what, if I have to pay $1 more for each unit of energy that's used so that I can keep the wetland safe, I'll take it. I'm willing to pay that, and I think most people will be willing to take that as well. The other question I have is, have all the abutters actually been notified by either the town or eversource that this is coming? Has there been an actual push of information to the abutters so that they aren't surprised by this?
Yes. There, in the documentation, which you can see on the docket, there is the list of people who were notified.
Okay,
So
but is
it's-
that all the abutters?
It's all the abutters within 300 feet.
Okay. And my last question, so having read through this gigantic document, which I really actually want to congratulate the acting police chief, fire chief, and the DPW head for all of the questions they put forth. You could drive a truck through the holes that are in this proposal coming from eversource about missing information, and I know you've acknowledged that before. How can they go forward in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever it is with this without answering this? We have to hold them accountable. They can't go forward without answering these questions. It's not acceptable. What can we do to make that happen? What
well-
recourse do we have? I mean, can they go forward as is without answering these questions and just say
it's-
too bad?
Well, here, that's the thing I think we started out to say in the beginning. I forget who was speaking. It comes down to the decision by the Energy Facility Siting Board. It's not a decision by the Board of Selectmen here,
Right.
so they can just advocate as best as possible. And, you know, hopefully with these questions that we've put forth, we're vetting everything we can do. And you're right, the chiefs and Director Small and Michael and everyone I spoke to, engineering and conservation agent, all did a great job in looking through the details of this, and that's a result of their efforts in putting that together in these answers. But it comes down to the board's decision, and and it's a frustrating process. It can be, even for me, today I was asking, well, why can't we ask this question at this time? But it's a legal proceeding, and there's a certain procedure. And we now have put in, I think, all the information that we can put in, and there's going to be rebuttal on Monday by eversource, asking some questions of their own folks to rebut some of our comments. And then after that, the brief occurs, and then the board takes, someone had asked, how many months it will take for the board to decide. It can be in the range of 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So my guess is this project, since we're on the middle of 2019, won't start till 2020, so everything will be pushed off a year, because the FSB sometimes takes a year to decide. So they've been pushing the EFSB folks to be quicker about this too. So my guess it will be pushed off a bit, but that's just based on what I've seen before. That's just a guess based on my experience, so I don't know for sure. But what can we do is just write the letters. I think the town council and the Board of Selectmen have done as much as they can given the procedures. This process, it's, how can I put it? It's,
It sucks.
It's tough. It's tough on the municipalities, because this is not what they do every day. The eversource folks and all the other utilities and their attorneys, that's what their job is every day. So
They don't even have to be here to answer the questions,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Well, I think
how
today,
is that okay?
Today, to be fair, what was their answer to you? eversource, I don't want to speak for
Well,
them.
this was last week and confirmed yesterday. They just said, due to the proceedings at the EFSB, they wouldn't be here to answer questions.
Right,
So it's a
but
project.
at some point, they need to be able to answer these questions, the ones that have been proposed in this briefing, the one that the Board of Selectmen and that the Concom have put forward, that everybody here has put forward. They shouldn't be allowed to just come in here and steamroller us because they want to and because they want to make a buck, okay? I mean, how many people's entire properties are going to get wrecked because of this when there isn't even a convincing argument that it's needed? It just doesn't make any sense.
So this is where I'll, what they have to do, what they're regulated to do, is to do those analyses that I talked about earlier that I'm not going to go on again. But they have a certain obligation to provide the reliability, and so they have a system planning group that goes through and does the analysis.
Are those records made public? And if not, why not?
In EFSB N21, there is that forecast.
Okay.
So it's a pretty.
So it's in that
it's in
pile
there.
of paperwork?
It's in the set of questions that the EFSB first
Okay.
put forth in November.
Gay, we've provided Presiding Officer Sharkey's email address, I believe, but is there another email address to the board, the Energy Facility Siting Board, that we can utilize? And
It's on this too.
It's on the back, it's on the back of the timeline.
Yeah, this works. So if you write a letter, it will be posted on that docket. So.
So this is, again, this is Presiding Officer Sharkey's email address. I'm asking, is there any other email address that we could be using in addition to Presiding Officer Sharkey's?
No, it doesn't matter, because it all goes to the same place. They take those letters, it's public record, they have to read them. as a consultant for other cases, I've read through them to understand what people are asking for, so I'm sure that's their job. They do go through all the information. And the hope is in this type of proceeding and hearings is that the FSB, they're asking all these questions and they're vetting, and they will come, the staff comes to a decision and they bring it to the FSB board, and the board makes the final order.
Is there any appeal to their order, or are they the highest authority on this type of an issue?
There are appeals. There are appeals, and so it can be, if the proceeding is not followed correctly, and it's more a legal aspect, so I'm getting out of my bailiwick here. There's ways of appealing, but
So-
only if there's certain issues that weren't legally correct.
So when this project was announced at the same time, there was a similar project announced in Hopkinton and Sudbury and whatnot. Hopkinton basically said, I don't think so, and they convinced eversource to walk away. I'd be very curious to find out what it is that they did to convince eversource to find a different path to get to where they wanted to, because they wanted to put in another station. And if we have some influence to get that information, maybe we can use that to stop this from going forward here. So, thank you.
Do you know what that project is?
Adam,
Oh, this is the power line.
is this on? Just to put a little clarity on this, there is a formal notice. You were talking about notice a little while ago. There's formal notice, which is a legal notice.
Yep.
And then there's what I would call reasonable notice of people that don't formally have to be given notice of these things, which includes most of Ashland, actually. I was at the siting board hearing on Friday, not as a participant, but as an observer. And one of the questions was, have the people in Chestnut Court been given notice? Now, there are a lot of people that live there. And the answer was, we only had to give notice to the owners of the apartments. So there was a request that maybe the rest of the people that live there might want to know what's going on.
Well, past
So-
history seems to show that eversource does the bare minimum
Well,
to meet those requirements.
Let me just finish. Just so that the rest of you know, Gay mentioned that this has been ongoing since 2017. That may be the case, but it has successfully flown under most people's radar since 2017. Their environmental impact report was approved by the state in September of 2018. The Conservation Commission got our notice of intent in January of 2019. So how an environmental impact report can be completed without impact from the Conservation Commission is just dumbfounding to me. Right. But that's part of the process. And are there legal hoops that they may have jumped through that someone missed? Probably. I don't know that. All I know is we've been reviewing this for 4 months, not 2.5 years.
Sure. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karen Allers, 53 Teller Drive. First of all, I wanted to thank all of the volunteers. I know the Conservation Committee members and the Select Board Committee members are all volunteers. So I appreciate those of you who are here tonight, and you're not being paid to be here tonight. This is the 4th meeting that I've attended about this pipeline, and there are a couple of facts that I've learned that I want to share for people who might be watching on TV that might not have heard them yet. The proposed pipeline will be twice the size of the one that's currently in the ground, but quadruple the output of gas. The current pipe is not leaking, it's not damaged, it's not unsafe. New England does not have a natural gas supply problem. There aren't any private investors willing to put money into building pipelines anymore in New England. We should be asking why, and why the ratepayers are going to pay for this one. eversource specifically said, and I wrote this down as a quote, that this new pipe would be a, quote, redundant source of supply, and of course, I looked up redundant even though I already knew what it meant, exceeding what is necessary or normal. The scientist in the back of the room who testified at the select board hearing a few weeks ago said that the current line is 99.999% efficient, and that a problem with blackouts would only happen if 3 independent sources of supply simultaneously disappeared, which is ridiculously not going to happen, which seems to contradict a lot of the information that you've given us, Gay. Additionally, every year demand for gas goes down due to increases in efficiency and consumer changeover to sustainable and renewable sources of power like solar. And finally, no one in Ashland is going to get any gas from this line. But we will bear the risk of all future leaks and spills. This all concerns me greatly, greatly. But what really concerns me is global warming. And all you need to do is watch the news, and you know that our planet is warming at an unsustainable, frightening rate. Every climate scientist tells us that we need to be transitioning from oil and gas, anything carbon-related, to non-carbon, renewable sources of energy. And a lot of the experts tell us we only have 12 years until the point of no return. 12 years. And yet this pipeline's not even going to be finished for 5 years. Why in the world would we build a new piece of carbon infrastructure? Why in the world? I see everyone shaking their head. And I know you guys feel like she's telling you there's nothing you can do, but we want you to work for us really hard. We want you to fight for us because we don't want this pipeline. Now, she's making it sound like there's nothing you can do, and I don't know what you can do. I'm not an expert. But I did hear the Conservation Committee members say that you can delay, that you can take this to court. Do it. Do whatever it takes to put them off and delay. And maybe by that point, we will be at a place where these pipelines are completely defunct, because that is coming. That day is coming, and it's coming soon. If we build this pipeline, what do the consumers of eversource's gas, what incentive do they have to get solar panels on their roof? They don't need to now, because they have a new pipeline that's going to last how many, 70 years into the future? I'm begging you, please, do whatever you possibly can to stop this pipeline. Not a different route. Stop it altogether. We don't want it. Thank you.
I'd like to mention a couple things that maybe you can do, but these are things that are already set up as a system for utilities to follow. So one of the requirements that I mentioned before is that they have to do a system planning study and figure out the reliability and decide the probability of incidents happening, whether 3 incidents will happen altogether or 2 or a combination of things. So they're required to do that. So one of the things is maybe if people want to change things, they call Massachusetts State Government, DPU, and ask them to change those regulations, because companies like eversource and National Grid and other utilities are required to come up with the system planning and the forecasting, and they have to follow certain rules or they will be penalized by the state, by us as taxpayers. Right? So they have to follow these regulations to come up with that planning. So if you want to reduce that planning criteria so that you don't need redundancy, because they're asking for redundancy, because in all types of utilities like electric, water, gas, you need loops, you need more than one path to make sure that everybody keeps getting water, electric, and gas. So the best way to change that is at the system planning level and reduce that criteria so that it's not, our system that wouldn't be as reliable to the 0.0001. Maybe it'll be 0.01 instead. So that those regulations would then need to be changed if that's what you want. So they're obligated, they have to do those calculations each year, and they are public record for that forecasting. So that's what you can choose to do that and affect it that way, because that's what I'm hearing. So I'm not here to argue the way things are. I'm just here to kind of give the technical facts of the way things work right now for you to decide as a town how you want to proceed going forward, and basically how much you want to spend going forward, and make the practical decisions of what Ashland should do. So my job here is not to advocate, but to provide kind of the technical background of these things. So I'm telling you that eversource and these other companies have to do these calculations as a requirement, so that reliability of electric, gas, and water, or whatever other utility that, service that they provide is there. So that's a choice, and everyone can call, our Congress people to try to make those changes. So that's an important piece of it. So redundancy is required as part of that system planning for reliability at this time. So whether it's needed or not, and what that percentage should be is then becomes a criteria from our state Massachusetts DPU. So that's one area that could be affected in the future if people, push that.
If the redundancy agreement is the one that you're using it, but if Concom wants it to be filled and left there, redundancy agreement fails one. The other thing is Concom did admit, eversource did admit in our meeting last time that none of the Ashland residents are making use of this excess flow, or the current residents will not be affected by the pressure drop right now. So whatever they are doing is not for the benefit of the Ashland resident users of the gas. So this is for outsiders. So residency doesn't help us. Neither the argument of residency doesn't work here, because if we impose the condition that the pipe needs to be filled and left, you don't have a redundant pipe for you to use it.
Yes, what you're saying is true, that with this project, because Ashland has a regulator on Prospect Street, and that's where the subsystem of Enstar basically is an exit ramp for the gas flow. So from that exit ramp, eventually it gets to your houses. So you do get gas from this, but this project will not change anything for that. Basically, you have a highway running through your town, and you have an exit ramp, and nothing's going to change the flow of that exit ramp, the traffic on and off. Or basically, it's all gas going off of it. So because you're so close to the source, in a sense, I don't, based on my engineering experience, the pressure in that regulator, what comes off of it, that 60 PSI, will not change. You're going to continue to get that, and you'll get that even though it's possible that if incidents happen and the reliability goes down, Ashland will still receive that gas, and the folks at the end of the system will not. So that's the evaluation that they look at. So yes, you have a highway going through your town with this exit ramp, which this gas does get to your houses. This project will not change that. So it's a regional project that will help the folks at the end of the system if there's an incident or a combination of what was in the reliability calculations.
The expert told us we didn't need this pipeline. Maybe he's going to talk later, but he's a scientist. He told us, we don't need this pipeline. And I'm wondering if any of you guys have contacted the state reps, Karen Spilka or Jack Lewis, and asked them to speak to the siting board on our behalf.
I mean, she's correct, it's not going to change anything for Ashland.
What's
So
not
who
gonna
appoints the siting board? Is it the governor?
Possibly, yes. I don't know, I have to go back and look.
I believe it is.
We're represented by the Senate President. Let's ask her if she can help us.
You're up, Diane.
My name is Diane Ring. I'm at 42 Bay Colony Drive. I did contact Representative Lewis and Senate President Spilka's office. They both want to be updated. They both have indicated that they can really only act if there's a legislative solution. In particular, Senate President Spilka's office, who was going to send a representative tonight, but I don't think they made it. But they are in the loop. I don't think they're going to advocate at this time, which doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying.
I was nodding off over there. Joel Arbeitman, Woodridge Lane, and I have 3 quick comments to make, and then I have a 1-page document to read. And big, with these eyes, big font. This is good news. Gay, I want to be polite. I respect your technical expertise. You sound like the biggest naysayer I've seen up here in a long time. I went to the hearing and spoke and submitted written testimony to the EFSB back in November, December, whenever it was. And I asked this question, and you did not address this. That's what I really have a big problem with. I asked, they talked, and you were quite correct in saying they assessed 3 items: need, cost, and impact, and you mentioned that, which is correct. And I asked, and then I said, would it also include environmental impact like climate change? And they said, absolutely. I haven't heard you mention that. I read your testimony, and I saw you were very articulate and certainly have technical expertise. But I didn't see a real focus on this at all. Right from the get-go, you were making comparisons between option 1 and option 2. You're about to hear in some detail about option 3. And I really don't understand how you could not have addressed this. There is nothing more important than that. So I had 2 other quick comments, and then I'd like to read this. Oh, I think they may have left. This woman, I thought, was among them. When it was stated that all of the abutters had been notified, and with deference to Carl's subsequent comments, I thought you and the folks who were here indicated that they had not been notified, and I don't know I was hoping they'd still be here to speak to that. Okay, they're within 300 feet but not abutters, so they should have been notified? I mean, do we have a gap in our process here? Are we really sure that we've touched all the bases out of respect to our local residents who are being really directly affected by this? I would hope that that could be revisited and make sure that we haven't missed anybody. And the last thing I want to say is there's a lot of very articulate people here and some great points. And I'm the worst person to talk about this because I don't know all the details, but the Sustainability Committee is going to be holding a hearing on climate, net zero, which is sort of what could be more climate change related. This is on Wednesday at the library at
Next
7 o'clock.
Wednesday at 7?
Okay. April 24th, so I hope that everybody here shows up and brings 25 people with them. How's that? We should have, is there anything more important than this? I'm not sure what it is. Okay, so I just want to read this 1-page thing. I'll read it as quickly as I can. We used to say that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I came here tonight to talk to the board and to those listening about a 3rd option regarding the pipeline. The choice is not or should not be between burying a new fossil fuel pipeline in our wetlands versus burying it under our roads. Two-option thinking is limited thinking. It is dangerous thinking, and it threatens our future. The third option, which is the one the town and the siting board need to endorse, is one that calls for no new fossil fuel infrastructure unless the current infrastructure is unsafe and cannot be readily maintained. The current pipeline is not unsafe. Last October, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, I'm losing my voice here, the IPCC issued a dire warning to all humanity that we had until 2030, here's the key point, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 45%. They've been going up every year. If we fail, we will have set in motion a runaway train of climate change that we will not be able to stop. Our mantra should be 45 to stay alive. I made that up. I just read that packs of walruses have literally walked off of cliffs in the Arctic where sea ice used to exist. They used to splash harmlessly into the sea, and now they have fallen to their deaths because the sea ice has receded from the water's edge. To paraphrase an old Beatles song, we are the walrus. We are sleepwalking towards the cliffs of history, oblivious to the dangers that await us. The silence from our federal leaders, our state leaders, our local leaders, and tragically from we the people has been deafening. Every single one of us has a responsibility to do all we can. At every level of government, a clarion call needs to be made to meet the existential crisis we face. If we proceed with business as usual, we will destroy our planet and ourselves. This is no longer about the inconveniences of torn-up backyards versus torn-up roads. The time has arrived to tell eversource that their business model is no longer viable. The time has arrived for Ashland to tell the siting board that the real reason we are opposed to this pipeline, and every pipeline, is because we cannot continue to expand the fossil fuel infrastructure in Ashland, in Massachusetts, or in our country. If we allow this, we have no future. We have no choice but to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2030. And eversource hopes to spend the next 5 years, this is half of our remaining time, building a pipeline capable of spewing 4 times more CO2 into our atmosphere than the current pipeline will enable them to increase greenhouse gas emissions. Did I get that right? No, I didn't. All right, anyway, I'll just move on. What they are seeking to do is unconscionable, and we need to do all we can to stop them. If we aren't part of the solution, we're part of the problem. Ashland should demand option 3, no new pipeline. Thank you.
Kathleen Rooney. I've already written this board and that board a letter, and I think I was remiss in saying how much I appreciate all the time everybody's put into this. Because I looked at the documents online, and I've looked at some other documents, and the amount of work that we've already had to go through to get to this point is staggering. The cost to the town is staggering. And volunteer time, paid staff time, and there's a lot of people who aren't here who are getting paid to deal with this. And so I feel like our town and our property owners that are directly abutted, all the citizens, we're David. The utility company has a boatload of lawyers, an army of them, and an army of technical experts, and we're all civilians. We're all dealing with this stuff, and we're doing the best that we can, and this process is deeply flawed. So there's been a lot of articulate people before me, and I'm just going to say they rock. All those comments need to be considered, and I think we all need to go to this energy siting board, or whatever they call themselves, and pack the room and say, enough, because this is enough. Thank you.
Chuck Lids, 150 Oregon Road. I had two things to say. One is to quote our Senate president, who some of us know, who said at a forum I was at the other day that from now on, everything must be considered in terms of climate change. And I take that very seriously. We really need to take this issue and every other issue in terms of climate change. And the second thing I wanted to say is just a minor correction to something Gay said. She said that natural gas burns cleaner than oil, which is true, but its contribution to climate change is that it's methane. And over the next 100-year period, it's 30 times as much of a climate change agent as carbon dioxide. And in producing natural gas, you lose about 2% of it to the fracking, and you lose more of it in leaks. We have 37 leaks in Ashland. I wish they would focus on that. Thank you.
Roberta Solman, Woodridge Lane. I want to thank everybody who has spoken already, and I just want to say that I agree completely with their passionate and extremely articulate comments. I especially agree with what Karen had said about stopping the pipeline, what Joel had said, what others had said, and also what Adam had said about just because it was there 70 years ago doesn't mean that the improvement or replacement is supposed to go in the same place. We are not in the same place. Our town, our country, the planet is not in the same place. I agree with everyone when they said it's completely unconscionable to destroy the wetlands or Native American archaeological sacred sites. And I just want to encourage everybody who was here, and especially those people who will be watching this at home, that this can't be the end of your involvement. You have to take everything that you said today, all of your passion, all of your articulate comments, put them in writing and send them to the siting board. You have to keep staying in touch with Representative Lewis, Senate President Spilka, the federal government too, but we know how things are moving there right now. We have more hope, I think, to change things at the state level, and we have to just keep pushing, pushing, and pushing. And I know it's exhausting, and I know it's hard to do, but if we don't do it for ourselves, nobody else will. And I just want to encourage people to show up at meetings, to go to the siting board, and make sure all of your comments, everything that you said today, if you sent something once in the fall, send something again. We've got to bombard them with the fact that Ashland does not want this, and it's not right for our town. Thank you.
Allison Katz, 5 Grover Road, not in a butter. I just had a couple questions about some of the financial aspects of the project and the impact to Ashland. So who will pay for the 5 years of police details? I'm hoping you don't say the town of Ashland.
No, it will be eversource.
Okay. The ratepayers, right.
And Dr. Hoffman's correct. That does go through the ratepayers.
Which is my next question. Will Ashland ratepayers see a rate increase to fund this pipeline?
I believe so. I'm not an expert on the mechanics of utility finance, but
So
I'm barely an expert on municipal
eversource
finance.
is asking to come rip up our town for 5 years and then ask us to pay for it for gas we're not going to get?
So the process, so I'm talking about, doesn't work that way. So Ashland itself won't get an increase, and people in general won't get an increase unless it's in a rate case. So I don't know what the period of time is, but every so often, there's a rate case analysis that's done. And many things go into it. That's out of my bailiwick, but everything that the state wants to push ahead goes into that rate case. And that's another way, actually, it's good you brought that up. Whenever there's a next rate case for each utility, I had read a couple of years ago about a rate case on the electric side of eversource in Massachusetts. And one of the things that came out of it is that there's 3 battery storage sites. So it's pushing battery storage technology, because part of the reason solar doesn't work right now all the time is because the sun goes down. And so we need battery storage to cover the 12 hours of darkness each day. So without battery storage moving forward, so a good thing that came out of the rate case, I don't know if there's an increase or decrease on electricity out of that rate case, but what I did read was of interest to me was the 3 battery storage sites that are being developed in Massachusetts, one in New Bedford, one on Martha's Vineyard, and I forget where the 3rd site is.
Allison, if I may, just, I mean, my major concern with the details that I expressed today is not having the staff to be able to fill those. We could potentially have 3 major projects happening over the next 3 to 4 years, including Route 126, the public safety building, and the downtown improvement project. We're going to have a hard enough time filling the details for those projects, much less this work that eversource is going to do. And so if we can't fill those, how much longer does this get drug out? I mean, if they start halfway through a section and then we can't fill that detail for another 2 or 3 weeks, does that just drag everything out longer and longer? So that's one of the major concerns with the details that I brought up, not just necessarily the cost.
Well, so, and the cost to the town to oversee this project and to be involved with it and the impact to all of our departments, I would ask that we put some stipulations in, if this is gonna go through, that eversource reimburse the town for us to get staff to handle this, because we don't wanna take that on. We don't even want this here. So we shouldn't have to bear the cost of something that's not going to benefit us. So I would ask that you guys consider that, if it does go through. I also,
We have, on that issue,
We have.
We have put together, and those have been the asks. So my job as technical consultant is to, be in that boundary of this EFSB process. So I may sound like a naysayer, but to do my job diligently for the town of Ashfield and the Board of Selectmen, I have to stay in that space, because if I spend hours outside of that, that's not gonna do, that's not the right thing to pay me for. So in that space is what I can tell you, and it does sound negative, but I want to give you the facts. So I can only tell you, yes, climate change is not included in this space of the EFSB, but I want to be straightforward with you.
That's not what they said to you in the hearing.
Well, if you go to table 4.7, 4-7,
Just telling you what they said.
in section 4 and 5, those are I think there's 16 characteristics that they compare the different routes that they evaluated. This is all I can tell you is what I know. So those characteristics, which do include some environmental impacts, length, some costs, so there's 16 of them, that's what they use to do the comparison. So it's table 4-7 if you want to look at the different routes. But, so I have to stay within that purview. And like I said earlier, my actionable items are with my company that I do work in the renewable space. So hopefully, leading to improving our world. But in this space, I have to give you the facts and tell the board how it is so that they have an they can make informed decisions. So that I have to be straight with that as much as I can. So, we did ask for mitigation, so we did know to do that, and the lists are in the transcripts and in the docket of what we're trying to cover. And I do believe that because this is a project going through Ashland and it's a host to this line, the town of Ashland should not incur any additional costs beyond, you know, what day-to-day normal is for this project. So,
Okay, and then my third point, which I think is outside your purview, but I guess this is to town manager, board of selectmen, and council who's not here. Our professor, I think, our scientist is here. And I think, I mean, I read your paper. It makes a pretty strong case that there's not a legitimate need for this. I think the, I don't know, 0.0001 might be being even generous to the likelihood of all these circumstances coming together. Do we have a legal basis to challenge the need to get this turned down by the EFSB because there's not a valid need for it? Like, it seems like a disaster scenario would have to occur.
Yeah, and I'll answer this to the best of my ability. I believe we can appeal the siting board's decision. The aspects of that decision or how they got to that decision, I'm not sure necessarily how much of that we can pick apart. But there is the ability to appeal that.
Was his study presented?
Yes.
yes.
And did they give any indications if they think there's a valid need for this in light of that information?
That was not the indication that I got today, no.
Could you say that as an affirmative statement? I'm not sure what you mean.
Sure. I've been cross-examined by them all day, so I'm in that kind of...
I can shine a light in your face
yeah.
if that would help.
So the EFSB did not offer comments at the point in time when we talked about Professor McKenna's study. I was actually being cross-examined by eversource's attorney about the manner in which the report was introduced and as part of my testimony.
Okay. So
we
you
didn't
don't know
necessarily
if
go to
it's
the content.
helping or
Well,
not.
I don't.
The FSB doesn't really comment. The only thing you can do is see their questioning and get whatever implication is from their line of questioning.
Okay.
So they do not make comments at this time. So their
It'll
comments
just be in summary at the end.
will be, right, right. So if there's questions that come up, you know that they're thinking about it or vetting it or investigating it, but you don't know, you know, what their comment or, you know, final will be until it comes out.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening. Jim Hanna, 65 Elliott Street, Ashland. Been here about 80 years, so doesn't make any difference. My concern, and this is my first time hearing this, and I'm in a butter, and I never got notified that there was going to be a well coming down the back of my house. I just didn't know that until today. So I just came to find out what it was all about. And it took about 5 minutes for me to understand that you have a terrible job, by the way.
Yes, right now,
I feel
yes.
sorry for you, but the situation is pretty clear to me that Ashland knows what they want to do and what they don't want to do. Now, all we got to do is stand tall and be honest. And we write a letter to the general folks who want to read a letter. And we're going to say, unfortunately, we're unable to meet your certain actions and certain interests. So therefore, we're going to deny. We're going to simply walk away from your kindly gift to allow us to be part of this project. And simply tell it. We got 12 reasons. I heard about 15 good reasons that we can identify our letter by. And say, okay, so under those circumstances, we cannot accept your fine approval. And then let them boil on it for a while. And then you'll find out that you're not going to get the job. And if you are, we'll give you all that you want except. So we just want to say, right now, we don't like what you're going, and it's not in the best interest of my town. Okay, you know my town? That's right. That's what we got to drive home. We're not doing it against the mill down in New Bedford or wherever else you're going. It's my town, my people, and my taxes. And if you can't help me there, I can't really help you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
42 Bay Colony. I also want to echo the thanks to everybody working so hard on this. I also want to echo my support, resounding support for the just say no option. I want to thank you for having this forum to collect our concerns. There have been a lot of them in detail besides just saying no. And I wonder what your follow-up will be, given that it seems like all the info that can be in is in. And I guess, Michael, I just want to know, is this appeal to the siting board something that we do as a reactive thing, or is it something we could do proactively?
Well, I still think we can write correspondence to the siting board. You can provide correspondence to the siting board as well. The appeal would be upon the issuance of a decision.
Okay, that's helpful. And I also want to know how we can stay updated. This forum is really helpful. You know, digging through that EFSB site is really painful. Is there a better way?
In terms of getting data, no,
Well,
I've had to do that too.
when the
So-
decision is made.
Yeah, so if you open it up every few days, or like, well, we had a hearing today. So, information, record requests, and they call them IRs, are posted as they're required, or the next day by the
And
FSB.
what are IRs, please?
Information requests.
Okay.
So we answered a number of those, and I think that was the packet of information. The gentleman earlier said he went through all that on April 4th, so probably on April 5th or 6th, around that time, that was posted to the docket. So once you go through it once, then if you just keep up with it every few days, you'll see the new posting, so it's easier to keep up. That's how my approach is to keep up with the information.
But is it not, if it's unreasonable, please just tell me, but is it not unreasonable to ask for updates from you guys?
Diane, we have, actually, it's on our regular agenda. Every meeting, we have a scheduled meeting tomorrow night. It's on our agenda. And I anticipate one of the things that we'll talk about relative to this, and I do want to wait, Mr. Shear is away, so I do want him to come back, but I believe as a board, we're going to absorb what we've heard tonight, and we're going to translate to the siting board as well. So, but that's one way, and of course the Concom is also in the middle of their hearings as well. So you're going to have, I think, multiple ways to keep aware. I agree with you. The going to the EFSB website is onerous. I mean, there's a ton of material there. It's just, I hesitate telling everybody, even though we put it out as a contact, just sending people there to try to figure it out for themselves, because it's a ton of material. A lot of it is technical. But that's what I would anticipate tomorrow night, at least at our meeting, is, once Mr. Shear gets back, we can, as a board, absorb this and then put out a communication to the siting board as a board of selectmen.
And I appreciate that, knowing that, and I would just like to risk redundancy by saying, to the extent possible, any reports that you can make on your own at the meeting. I know it's been difficult because you've been meeting in executive session at the suggestion of council, but to the extent you can share information, it's really appreciated and needed. Thank you.
Diane, eversource is also on the Concom's agenda for the 22nd of this month, and will continue to be in the near future. We will certainly let you know if that's continued or not. But and I also believe that not everyone gets the paper, but the Metro West Daily News now knows that this is an important issue in Ashland and has started reporting on it on a fairly regular basis, so you might be able to get some information there too as well.
Thank you, Carl.
Could I just ask a question? Diane, hold on one sec. No, I'm just wondering if it would be helpful if we put like a proactive notice out there when some major things are being filed or have been filed. Not necessarily for every piece of information, but saying, you can go to the please refer to the EFSB website. This has been filed. It's a major piece of information. If you think that will be helpful. Okay.
Michael, thank you. That's the stuff I was talking about.
And then,
All right, Rob St. Germain, Winter Street. I'm also a member of Town Forest Committee and Stormwater Committee. I just wanted to say something which is probably obvious, but I think needs to be said and has been said tonight, and that we're dealing, of course, with a 500-pound gorilla that is greed-driven, and that they lie and they cheat any single way they can. An example of that is the pole replacement they did on the power line through the town forest. They wrote a letter to the town saying they weren't making any material changes and therefore did not have to go before the Conservation Commission. They added road where there wasn't road. They extended the road. They widened the road. They made substantial changes, and they devastated the habitat and the power line. They destroyed several areas where there were particularly birds that we haven't seen there since. So that's what we're dealing with. The devil is in the detail, and if we're going to fight against them, we have to look at the detail, and we have to hold them to it. Thank you.
So,
Mr. Chairman,
welcome again,
Thank you.
Professor.
I am not a resident, but with your permission, I would like to address a couple issues.
Well, absolutely. We're sorry to keep you away from your family so late, so by all means.
Thank you. First of all, just to all of you, go to the EFSB meetings. They're fascinating. The fact that the committee members actually can stay conscious during the meeting is a remarkable testimony to how much they care about what's going on. And I don't mean that as a joke. Go. It's fascinating to see the wheels of the Commonwealth turn very, very slowly. I'd also like to thank Gay. You've had a tough night, and I appreciate your honesty. It's been hard for you. It hasn't been hard for me because I've been sitting in the back and I have the internet. And so a couple interesting things. There's a vacancy on the siting board. They want a citizen, and the governor appoints them. You can actually nominate yourself on their website. Go tonight. Number two, a little bit more seriously, who gets the gas from the transfer pipeline? Again, I have the internet at my command, and there are no power facilities sourced by that pipeline. According to the I'm going to get really nerdy here for a minute. According to the 2015-2020 FSP forecast and supply plan, it's all residential or commercial, so there's no power plant associated with it. Over the entire eversource area, it's growing at about 1% per year. That's how fast electrical consumption in New England is decreasing. They're going to cancel out, more or less than. The real thing I wanted to talk about, though, is Minnesota. In Minnesota, the temperature on January 31st was colder than it was here. It was negative 28 degrees. 150 customers lost gas service after it was turned off by the gas company. They did not lose it because of pressure loss. It was turned off by the gas company to prevent more losses. 150 people lost gas for approximately 13 hours. That's about 1,800 customer hours, how things are measured. That's 3% of eversource's own indication of a fault. Right? Let that sink in for a minute. The most egregious example of when people have lost gas because of the problem that eversource says is here. eversource's own category of danger levels says that what happened in Minnesota is only 3% of what they consider a major interruption to gas. Minnesota doesn't count for what they're trying to say is the problem here. It wouldn't be enough to qualify as a problem. They're talking about a problem that just doesn't exist. There is no need to replace this gas line. There's no data to support it. Show me the data. In order for this thing to be a real problem, we would have to get temperatures that are as low as the record low temperature in New England. And that's unlikely. It's negative 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Same as what happened in Minnesota. One of the frustrations that many of you have indicated during tonight is how irrational the EFSB seems to be to common citizen requirements. And as you have tried to say, that's just how it is. And it is. Go and see. You'll see that. But there's no need. Drive eversource to demonstrate need. Where's the data that backs up their model? What's the pressure at each point along the line? Demand the records. How much pressure is there? How often has the pressure, sorry, nerd talk, how often has the pressure at the end of the line gotten to 98 PSIG? Because if it's never gotten there, there's no need. And then ask them why, before they finish installing the new pipeline, the capacity of the pipeline goes up even though the pressure stays the same. Where's that gas coming from? If they can not increase the pressure and increase supply, why can't they do it now? These are questions of data. They're questions of need, and they're within the purview of the EFSB. They're constrained by the fact that the law is not on their side. It's an uphill battle for them, but it's a battle you can win with the data. Thank you.
But also, if you could comment, because it is an uphill battle. So it has been, and like I said, you don't want to be the naysayer, but the thing, if you comment on it, is the system planning it, that the companies are required to do this, and they roll out each year the system planning. So you're basically saying to get this changed so that the evaluation isn't done in the same way, what can be done?
The evaluation process, I think, although your comment is important and should be changed, I agree with you totally, isn't the issue here. The issue is there demonstrated need? And is it too late in the process for you to show that the need that they suggest is in fact false? If you can demonstrate by fact that their need is false, then their case falls apart. The real issue here is whether they need to expand the pipeline to continue the service to the 19,000 commercial and residential customers. That's part A of their proposal. Part B is increasing the customer base with the increased supply. A and B, as I've already said, are incompatible. One sucks gas from the other. And A is not true. It's not a process of, you're right, and I'm right. This is a wonderful situation. It rarely happens. Yay for both of us. I'm married, yes. You're asking, I think, a different important question.
Right. So, and to your question, where are we in this EFSB process? To have evaluated the need, the town would have needed to hire somebody to do that calculation with all the data and extracted that ahead of time before this whole process. So we're way down this pathway, and it is too, so I hate being a naysayer,
No,
but we're too late.
So let me say it for you. It may well be too late
yeah.
by the rules that they want you to follow.
rules.
The question is, can
That
the
we
rules,
all have to follow, yeah.
can the rules, can you all find a place in the rules that allow you to go back and say, well, because of this omission of procedure, we can now stand in with this data? Now, that's the question. Now, before you, I agree, yes, that's exactly, but it's unlikely, I think, that that's going to be true. And so then the process has to become, where's the appeal? How do you go back to the beginning? How do you find a mechanism to return the town so that they can do this work?
And again, that goes into the legal realm of
Right.
this, because the only way you can have appeal is my understanding, and I am not the expert on this process, especially the legal side. So there would need to be a legal way of,
Right.
of appealing, so as opposed to a technical way or a preference sort of way.
And
and
that's up
where
to
we
the
are.
residents to
Right,
decide how
right.
they want to do
And
that.
that's where, I have to, give what our thoughts are, so that the board here can go ahead, and the town of Ashland can go ahead and make the most prudent decision for the town.
If there is a way, if the wetlands turned out to be an issue, you need to come to the microphone.
Please come to the mic.
Repeat the question.
Lynn Lids, 150 Oregon Road. If the wetlands did indeed turn out to be an issue, which it may or may not be, might that be an opportunity to reopen another path? The preferred route would not necessarily be possible? Just a question.
I mean, I could try to answer that. So, I mean, the Conservation Commission, as part of their process, can approve, deny, or condition a process or a project to their extent. Let's just say, hypothetically, if they decide to deny the project, it would then be on eversource's. It would be the onus on eversource to determine whether or not they would want to appeal that decision. And actually, they would have to go in two concurrent tracks based on the Wetlands Protection Act at the state level and the local bylaw.
So it might delay, and at least, but, okay, thank you.
Quick question, if there were an appeal, to whom would the appeal be made? The same board or someone higher up in state government?
I believe it's the SJC of Massachusetts.
Uh-huh, okay. That might be worth a shot.
Professor, you're all set? Good. Well,
Thank you very
thank you. Appreciate it.
Good job.
If there's no other comments to be made, again, we have our regular scheduled select board meeting tomorrow evening. This is on our agenda. We'll have an opportunity to update Mr. Scheer, and as Carl mentioned, Concom is meeting on the 25th, 22nd, and eversource, unless it's continued, eversource will be there, unlike this evening. So appreciate everybody coming out tonight. If there's no one else to speak, then I would ask for a motion to. Sure.
From 43 Pennock. I'm here with my husband, Stuart. You're talking about trying to find if there's a way for appeals or a way to redo or a way to make this process a little longer. I wonder about the notice requirements. You've heard that some people who are abutters did not get notice. You also, and I understand that the abutter is defined as 300 feet, is it? Now, a question, when you're dealing with something dangerous, like a pipeline is, it could have an accident, is 300 feet appropriate for notification of abutters? And that is a procedural thing that probably wasn't followed correctly. It's one thing when you want to build a road. It's quite something else when you're going to be building. And by the way, they are talking about installing the new line while the old line is working. We've got the easement right in our backyard. I don't know, what is it, 20 feet, honey? 20 feet. What is 20 feet? I know you're talking about that vacuum and it can go and take whatever it can do with roots, but there's boulders back there. Anyway, so the idea is simply what you can do about notice not having been proper for this type of project, and surely they should have known. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I can just say there's a number number of different elements that we can look at in terms of procedure and whether or not things were followed. I don't know necessarily how much detail we want to get into at a public meeting about some of that, especially when I'm sure eversource's attorneys will be reviewing this. But that's definitely, there's a number of different places where you can point to and say, yeah, this could be a little problematic.
Keeping that line in service while they try to install is ridiculous.
Well, again, thank you for attending tonight. It's very much appreciated. So if no other comments, I would...
Yeah, we're going to take care of it.
And the motion to adjourn by the Board of Selectmen?